Hi, my name is Erin Blankenship. In 2018, we were honored to receive a large donation of artworks by Holocaust survivor and artist Toby Knobel Fluek from her daughter and son-in-law, Lillian and Stephen Finkler of New Jersey. Toby used the creation of artwork as a means to tell her story as a Holocaust survivor and eventually published 2 books using her art as illustrations. One of these books is Memories of My Life in a Polish Village, which tells what it was like for her growing up in a small village in eastern Poland and eventually under Russian and then Nazi occupation. She included drawings of herself and her family as they were forced into the ghetto, and then her subsequent escape and living in hiding until she was liberated. The other book by Toby Knobel Fluek is titled Passover as I Remember It. In this book, she illustrates scenes from her childhood that describe how she and her family prepared and celebrated the holiday. Passover is a Jewish holiday that is celebrated over 8 days every spring, the dates of which correspond with the Jewish calendar. The holiday commemorates the freedom of the Israelites from slavery in ancient Egypt. As commanded, it is observed by avoiding leavening in all foods throughout the course of the 8 days and by the Seder. A Seder is a ritual meal that includes reciting the Passover story from the Haggadah and by eating specific foods such as matzah, or unleavened bread, bitter herbs, egg, harisset, a sweet paste made from fruit and nuts. The Seder is observed on the first 2 nights of the holiday. Today, in honor of the holiday, I will be sharing some of these artworks that are now in our permanent collection and the words written by the artist to describe how she celebrated Passover. The first work is entitled Toby on the Farm. When I was a little girl, I lived in Czernica, a small village in Poland. I lived with 2 older sisters, Circe and Lycia, and my older brother Aaron, and my parents. In our village, there was no electricity. We used kerosene lamps. We had no running water in the house. We cooked on a wood-burning stove and baked our own bread. Our house had earthen floors. My favorite holiday was Passover. That was the time I got new shoes and sometimes a new dress, and we ate meat every day for a whole week. The Shoemaker. I was very excited when my mother told me in March that it was time to have my new shoes made for Passover. Mother bought leather from Hirsch Milrom, a merchant, and we took it to Ivan, the village shoemaker. First, he measured my foot, then he cut the leather, glued it, sewed it, and knocked the shoe together with little wooden pegs called flecklach. It took him a whole week to make my new pair of shoes. During the year, many people had their shoes latted or patched, but for the holidays, they would get new shoes. Making wine. 5 weeks before Passover, Mother made the wine. I helped cut the raisins, even though she would scold me for snacking on too many of them. Mother put the raisins into a large glass bottle with sugar and water. She covered it with a thin cloth and put it on top of the closet near the stove. When the mixture had fermented and tasted just right, Mother squeezed it through a cheesecloth. I liked to watch her, but I wasn't allowed to sample the wine before the Seder. The wine actually tasted like raisin juice, but we didn't know any better and enjoyed it just the same. Flour for matzos. Father took special care to make the Passover flour for baking our matzos. The previous fall, he supervised the harvesting of the wheat as required by Orthodox law. He made sure it didn't get wet from the rain before it was brought to the barn to be stored. During the winter, the mill would be made kashered, by cleaning it thoroughly under a rabbi's supervision. Only then was the special wheat ground into flour. 2 weeks before Passover, we baked our own matzos. Mother invited our neighbors to bake their matzos in our home, and it became a community project. Baking matzos. I love the excitement when our Jewish neighbors crowded into our large room to bake matzos. They brought sacks of flour and rolling pins and wore clean aprons with scarves covering their hair. As my sister Circe mixed the flour in a brass basin, I added water. She kneaded it quickly, then Mother rolled out the dough and I made the holes. All the women kneaded and rolled at once, then Father put the matzos into the oven. The mixing, kneading, and rolling had to be completed in less than 18 minutes so that the dough would not have time to rise. My parents baked 40 pounds of matzos for our family. The matzos were hung from the attic ceiling in a featherbed cover away from any chametz, leavened bread, and other non-Passover food. Searching for chametz. The night before the first Seder, we performed a ritual called Boidech Chametz, the search for the bread. Mother held a lit candle and Father carried a goose feather and a wooden spoon. We walked from window to window looking for pieces of bread that Father had placed there earlier. Father recited a benediction while he brushed the bread and crumbs from each window. The next morning, the wooden spoon, feather, and bread were burned in a special fire in the stove. Unpacking the Passover dishes. That same evening, Mother brought down the Passover dishes from the attic. I smacked my lips when I saw the brown glazed pots in which baked kislach, a kind of pudding from boiled potatoes and eggs. As she unpacked each pot and pan, she told me who gave it to her. Grandma Chaya Dean gave the bowl with the red flower design, and the white enamel pot came from Aunt Matzel. Then she unpacked the Elijah cup and a glass wine cup for everyone in our family. Mine was the smallest with a little handle. Father had a silver becher, a Kiddush cup. Cooking. After breakfast on the morning of the Seder, the last crumbs of bread were burned. Mother cleaned the kitchen again, and Father brought in a large Passover kitchen tabletop. Then Mother started preparing food for the Seder. I stood at the table imagining potato pancakes fried in oil until Mother put me to work peeling potatoes. Mother cooked gefilte fish, chicken, flanken, and tzimmetz, carrots with chicken fat. She made noodles from eggs and potato starch and dessert from dried apples. For lunch, we ate a mixture of boiled potatoes, goose fat, onions, and boiled eggs with borscht. We weren't allowed to taste anything else. We could only smell the aromas and wait for the Seder. Making harosas. After lunch, while Mother cooked and Circe ironed our holiday dresses, Father prepared the harosas, which represented the mortar, cement made by the Hebrew slaves in Egypt. We had picked the nuts from the walnut tree last summer. I remembered peeling off the grain hulls and drying the nuts in the hot sun. Father crushed the nuts with the mortar and pestle, which had been in our family for generations. He added chopped nuts, wine, and cinnamon. I wasn't allowed to taste the harosas before the Seder, but I could wait, for I knew it would be starting soon. The Seder plate. Toby writes, Father made up the Seder plate, which holds the symbols of the Passover story. Our gargela, or chicken neck, was the roasted shank bone, which represents the Passover offering. Father roasted a hard-boiled egg, another symbol of the Passover offering. He cut pieces of horseradish from our garden for the maror, the bitter herbs, which stood for the bitterness of our people in slavery. I would run from the room because of the smell of the horseradish burned my eyes. There was a piece of boiled potato, karpas, for each of us, representing spring. All this, with the harosas, was placed on the table next to the matzah. The Seder. My father poured the first cup of wine for each of us, then he filled the Elijah cup with wine and made Kiddush, reciting the blessing over the wine. We all repeated the blessing and drank the first cup. Mother brought water to the bedside, and Father poured it over his hands into a brass basin. Then each of us took a piece of potato and dipped it in the salt water to remind us of our sweat and tears while we were slaves in Egypt. Next, Father took the middle matzo from under the matzo cover, broke it in half, and placed on half the afikomen, literally dessert, under the tablecloth. The second night. At the second night's Seder, Father again chanted the entire Haggadah. We finished the harosas and the symbolic burned egg from the Seder plate, and ate another delicious Seder meal. Afterward, Mother saved a piece of the afikomen for next year, believing that this brought good luck. Chol Hamoed, the middle days of Passover, was a festive time. In the shtetl, many people didn't work at all because the whole week was considered a holiday. Even in our small village, we would spazier, stroll the streets, and I liked to show off my new dress and shoes. It was known as the time to get engaged, and brides and grooms would visit each other's families. Finally, this one is entitled The End of Passover. Toby writes, Passover ended too quickly for me. I enjoyed the preparation, the festivities, the Seder, and the delicious food. I felt sad when my mother packed up the dishes, but I knew she was relieved that she wouldn't have to cook so much. Now that spring was here, Father would have the fields plowed. He would plant potatoes and sow the grain. Mother was ready to plant vegetables in the garden, and I knew that the school year would be coming to an end soon. Mother took the dishes up to the attic and made a wish. We should live until next year to celebrate Passover again and in good health. Thank you for taking the time to hear and see some of Toby Knobel Fluek's Passover memories with me. If you're interested in seeing more of her works in the collection of the Florida Holocaust Museum, go to our website at thefhm.org and search our collection. Click on the word Collections. This brings you to our Collections page, and from here you can scroll down until you see the words Search the Collection. Once you click this, it'll bring up a brand new page, and here you'll be able to search the collection in our online portal. Simply use the online search by putting your cursor in the search bar above and typing in any part of her name. I'm going to use her last name, Fluek, F-L-U-E-K, and click search. This brings up all of the works available in our online portal by Toby Fluek. And so here, if I click on just the image for one of these records, it'll enlarge the photo for you to see more detail. Or if I click on the number next to the images, it'll pull up the full object record where you can read a summary of the artwork and then read more about Toby Fluek down below. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and on behalf of the staff and the Board of Directors of the Florida Holocaust Museum, I'd like to wish you and yours a happy Passover. Thanks so much, and have a great day.